Facebook, and websites, inshallah, internationally. We're also broadcasting through our partner radio stations, Salam Radio in Peterborough, Radio Ikhlas in Derby, Link FM in Sheffield, and Radio Dawn in Nottingham. Can I welcome all my listeners in Luton, in the surrounding areas, and through these partner radio stations and internationally if anyone's listening. Welcome to the show today. As usual, we have a packed show for you today talking about international and national and local issues. And we're going to be kicking off shortly with a very pertinent issue, which I think touches many people's hearts because it relates to things it relates to matters of the heart, and it relates to matters of people who are loved ones who have departed. So I'm not sure whether you know or not, but locally in Luton, this is a Luton story. In Luton, even though the main graveyard that we have is on top of a hill, it was subject to some severe flooding over the last couple of weeks through the intensive rains. And so there was a campaign, I guess. There's lots of people on change.com who actually sort of put their signatures to get the council to do something about it, because this is a very sensitive subject, a very sensitive topic for our community. Flooding in flooded graves is a very sensitive subject. So I have with me to discuss this issue, I guess, from more from a practical point of view rather than a spiritual point of view. We have Councillor Aslam, who's an active councillor in Luton. I'm not sure he's quite his portfolio, but I'm sure he's willing to talk about it. And we have also Harun Kiani. I guess he's an expert in this area and he's very vocal. And Zaid Hussain, who's campaigning for an alternative to a local government supplied facility. So can I welcome you all? Assalamu alaikum. And can I welcome Councillor Aslam first of all? Assalamu alaikum, Aslam Saab.
Wa alaikum salam, Zaffar. Thank you very much for inviting me.
So I guess the first point to note is that the sensitivity of this issue, the flooding of the graves, how is that? Is that something that's appreciated in the council circles at all?
Yeah, no, of course, Zaffar, don't forget that we all councillors, as well as Luton, have been going through very challenging times, and we all have lost loved ones, friends or family, and who are buried over at the cemetery. So we do understand the sensitivity, and we've had unprecedented amount of burials over the past months, and because of these challenges, it's put a strain on a lot of us, a lot of the resources that we have had in the past. But I would like to say here in this case, as soon as we got to hear about or see the flooding, we were very proactive in addressing the situation with getting the water pumped out. As you can see, where I don't know whether you visited the cemetery or not, like you quite rightly mentioned, is at the high ground, but the area of burial which was concerned is slightly on the lower ground. We've had unprecedented rain, and the surrounding field which falls into Hertfordshire, where the flooding was coming over to the graves. Initially, there were some bunds and sandbags put in place, and unfortunately, with this amount of rain, it was not enough. We've seen flooding across the country. So we have taken immediate action, both in the short term, medium term, and long term. We have allocated more resource. People from parks moving over to support our colleagues over at the cemetery. We've got contractors and engineers working there, looking at long-term solutions. They're doing technical surveys, looking at how we can sort of channel the water and direct it away from the fields. We have also brought into use land for burials, which is nearby and which is slightly higher and not subject to flooding. However, there are some graves being dug in the area wherever is appropriate. So we've taken appropriate action. People have been working tirelessly, officers, councillors, and everyone else to ensure that we eradicate this problem.
So I guess the immediate question that comes to mind really is that this level of rains are not unique. We've had this level of rain before, but we've not had flooding. So why is it unique? Why has it happened this time?
Well, if you look at the cemetery, most of the burials were taking place on different sites, and this area where now being used, the last bit of land that we are using now, whether it's Muslim graveyard or for the Christians or anybody else, is slightly at the lower ground, and the surrounding field that we find ourselves, that's where the flooding is coming over to the cemetery. So we did not quite anticipate this amount of rain and flooding. So it's something that you cannot plan for, unfortunately, when you have consistent rain. Therefore we the bunds that we put initially were not enough, and the water was overflowing. But as soon as we saw the increase in the water flow and flooding taking place, we instructed the engineers to solve this problem.
Mm-hmm. But I guess, again, going back to the question again, this level of rain we've had before. There's obviously been some work in the adjacent fields, which, as you're saying, are part of Hertfordshire. There was lots of building work going on there. Has that had an impact? Has that somehow upset the water table and pushed the rain?
Well, I mean, there were a lot of suggestions and being suggested, and people were talking about works around surrounding field. We have investigated, and that's not something which is causing the flooding or affecting the table, as you say. It's more to do with excessive amount of rain over a period of time, so therefore the location of the graveyard unfortunately was at risk of flooding, and that's why we saw some flooding.
Yeah. So I guess from a layperson's point of view, seeing pumping pumps and lorries, etc., seems like a very temporary solution. What's been done to make sure that this doesn't happen again? Because you're not going to keep up with the rain, to be honest. If you can pump as much as you like, and if the rains come, you're going to get flooding again. So what's needed really is a proper solution, and what's happening about a proper solution.
Well, that's why we commissioned engineers to do a full technical geotechnical survey. What that means is that they're looking at, from an engineering point of view, how do we eradicate this problem in the long term. So temporarily, what you're seeing is pumps pumping the water away from the site. And you also have seen a huge trench to separate the ground from Hertfordshire ourselves, and also you've seen bunds and sandbags and so forth being put up. So for that's addressed the situation temporarily. For a long-term solution, we're waiting for the engineers' report to come back. And then we will commission that work immediately as soon as we get that report. So that's happening as we speak. And we will get the full report, and we will be sharing that with you guys.
Indeed. Okay. If I can bring Haroon Kiani in. Haroon, Councillor Aslam has suggested that as soon as the problem was made aware, there was immediate action taken. Is that the impression you got as well, or do you have a different view?
Firstly, it was made aware by the public, because I've shared something. I shared it with Councillor Aslam in one of the groups I'm in, saying, can he help? And Councillor Aslam is one of the proactive councillors that we have got in Luton Borough Council. So there was action taken. In terms of, I slightly disagree with Councillor Aslam. This was a reactive. It wasn't planned. Like you suggested at the start, water is not something new there. Yeah, there have been complaints in the past where people have seen water, but I don't think it was followed up. What's now changed is we are, as councillors put it, using that part of the graveyard where the water, is going to be a problem. So I believe there is, a retrospective that needs to happen to understand Why wasn't this picked up a lot sooner? I do, applaud the attempts that are being made, and the future plans. I look forward to seeing what they are going to be in terms of solving the longer term issue.
Yeah, Councillor, can I also add, there was a petition launched on change.org. There's something like, I think, 4,000 or 5,000 signatures on there. Was that a spur to get action? Picking up on what Harun said, that this was reported previously and ignored.
Well, I'm not sure about the details of the past, but as soon as the information was shared with me and my other colleagues, at the weekend we had the officers immediately coming to the site and having a look and addressing the problem. So we started taking action immediately, and I'd like to thank Harun and everyone else for sharing that information. But this was picked up. I remember when I had the portfolio, when we were getting a bit of a dampness in the graveyards, we started applying sand immediately. But we hadn't had this amount of flooding in the past. Let me reassure you that there's a problem with water, in Bedford and elsewhere. So it's not just unique to Luton. But in terms of solving it, we thought that by putting the bunds up, that would solve the situation, because we haven't seen water of this magnitude before. It just happens to, because it's been constantly raining, and the water has, unfortunately, it's got nowhere to go. So it started building up and it started flowing, and so flooding. So we immediately dug a trench. We immediately got the water pumps in place. But with social media these days, the news travels fast, and when it's an emotional subject, a lot of people, when they heard about it, I know that there was a campaign launched. But if you look at the action that we took, it was in matter of hours. Over the weekend, everyone was active. So let me reassure you, there's no complacency. We are fully committed and to getting the work done and resolving this, not in the short term, but also in the long term.
Okay. Zahid Hussain, I think you're trying to, or you're campaigning for a Muslim cemetery, a Muslim graveyard. Now, is that in response to what's happened recently, or is it something that you've campaigned for all along, and how is that going to help I guess the current situation?
Assalamu alaikum, Brother Zaffar. Thank you very much for having me on. And assalamu alaikum to all the listeners, inshallah. I have been campaigning for a separate dedicated Muslim cemetery for a number of years. And the reason is there are a couple of issues with the Muslim burial ground in Stopsley. One of them is the fact that all the burial plots are sold on a leasehold basis, and I don't think that any Muslim should be living in the knowledge that the land, the grave where their loved one is buried, could be turned over to alternative use, or their other burials can take on place on top of it, even if it is after 99 years or whatever that period of lease may be. We would like to see every Muslim grave be made available on a freehold basis, where a grave is a grave, and inshallah it's there until until the Muslim community is present in this country, inshallah. And for that reason, I've been talking to lots of members of the community and different masajid, and now alhamdulillah we have a small number of brothers who have got together and who are really determined to see this happen. So we are trying to identify, locate some suitable land which we can purchase, and we can make it available for the community. And I mean, for example, we have some really good models in London, the Gardens of Peace and Internal Gardens. There are a few very well-maintained Muslim cemeteries. We would like to see something similar here in or around Luton, made available for our community, inshallah.
So I guess what you're saying, your driver is a freehold plot rather than a lease. Rather than anything that's happened in the graveyard recently.
Yeah.
So I guess the immediate question again that comes to my mind is that the traditions of Sunnah allows for graves to be, I guess, reused again after a period of time, and it's a lot shorter than 99 years, if I remember correctly. And if you happen to have died in Saudi, I think they turn over the graves very quickly in terms of, a handful of years. I don't know the exact number, but a handful of years rather than tens of years. So,
yeah.
how should that be? Why should that be a driver?
I think the key thing is that it should be the Muslim community should have the ownership of this. Yes, if they feel that it's appropriate to do that, to reuse the land for for other burials to take place, that the Muslim community, the Muslims should decide that. At the moment,
why? But why?
Local government officers of other faiths, perhaps, they have their own reasons, or this pressure on the land. I mean, we've been hearing for a number of years that the land is running out. The land is running out. There's a lot of pressure.
So Zaf, if I can add to what I said, because I'm part of the sort of people interested in this. One of the other drivers is there is no other option. At the moment, you've only got the veil, and COVID-19 has sort of increased. Before, a lot of burials, some people used to go back home and get buried there. That is no longer an option, at least while COVID is in existence. And, the government or whoever legislates this doesn't allow you to take your loved ones to your home country and get buried there. And increasingly, more and more people are deciding to follow Sunnah and be buried in the country that they're living in or where they pass away. So there is a demand in that regard as well. And also, the only option we have at the moment is the Vale Cemetery. So we are looking for our Muslim alternative to cater for other things on top of not just burials. We are discussing this at early stages, so I don't want to say, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. We just sort of formed a few sort of people who want to see this through, and we're discussing ideas at the moment.
Yeah, I'm curious to understand what the I guess the financial model for this is going to be, because you have a handful of plots basically which you buy and then you sell them on for perpetuity. Sooner or later, you're just going to run out, right? So the financial model collapses, right, when you run out of plots, right? How are you gonna maintain it going forward? So once the revenue stream, i.e., people willing to buy the land for the loved ones, is exhausted, how are you going to then continue to sort of cater for the graveyard and upkeep of it?
So, Zaf, that is one of the sort of questions we're trying to answer in terms of, how we are going to go about. We're looking at examples of the other cemeteries that have been set up, like Eternal Gardens that Brother Zahid has mentioned, to see how they are doing it. So it's not like we've organized and we're already sort of shipping in. Land is just one side of it. It's how we are going to completely set this up and present this. It's just a few individuals that we've gotten together, and we're at the moment sort of sharing ideas and saying, what can be option, investigating what's available there.
Right, Councillor Aslam, I guess I think one point is noted is that the demand for land is now increasing because there's a lot more deaths because of COVID, etc. And I guess I think you mentioned the fact that some additional land has been bought to actually for the burial ground. Is that going to be sufficient, or what's the thinking?
Yeah, no, we have at the executive approved the decision of acquiring more land, and we will be submitting a planning. We're doing surveys at the moment, and we will be submitting a planning application very soon. And just to reassure you that we are planning ahead, and it's our statutory duty to ensure that we cater for dead, and there's enough burial space, and also making sure that for those who choose to cremate, the facilities are as good as they can be. And let me reassure you that from a graveyard point of view, and from a Muslim community point of view, I like to believe that our service, our cemetery, is one of the best custom for Muslim community in the country, because I personally have led, and I have looked into this in depth across the country. A lot of people do make claims and compare the cemeteries to others, but let me assure you that here you've got 7-day registration, 7-day burial. I understand the 99-year lease that you are talking about. I'm not no scholar, but my understanding is that within Islam you can bury on top of a grave, and like you mentioned about Saudi Arabia, they recycle land fairly quickly. Here, I've been living here for the past 40 years, and if you look at the cemetery has extended, there hasn't been any land which has been recycled. So, we're acquiring more land. And as far as the access is concerned, we work very closely with the community. A lot of these decisions, even that death to burial review, which was conducted, was done in consultation and in partnership with all the funeral directors, all the imams, and as well as the community. One of the big, most well-attended community meetings that we had in our town, and we implemented every single recommendation which came from that review. And our model has been adopted. And when I was a portfolio holder, 27 councils across the country adopted our model, and they continue to do so. And even the review, which was done nationally, our work had a lot to do with it. So, we in Luton are doing exceptionally well. And a lot of volunteers and a lot of people from the community meet on regular basis. We do have regular meetings with our funeral directors and from our community. So I like to think that we are serving the community to the best of our ability and the best we can, and it's an exemplary model that we've got in the country.
But I think you'd accept that if there was more choice for people, right? That's surely that's going to improve the situation or make it better.
Of course, choice is a good thing. Look, I'm not against the idea of having another sort of custom made cemetery. If people feel that there's a need and there's people out there who want to do it, by all means, you completely have my support, du'as and sympathies. But as far as local authority is concerned, we like to believe that we've got a very, very good model in place, which is serving the community and meeting their needs.
And Vale is not the only place. Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just also like to say that the fact is that in the local authority burial ground in Stopsley, the fact is that Muslims are buried in close vicinity with people of other faiths and people of no faith. We would like to give people the choice of having their loved ones buried in a dedicated Muslim cemetery.
Well, I mean, just to address your point, when I some of those, as you probably know, that my background is in engineering, and I'm sort of used to sort of planning and and developments and so forth. When the plans were being developed while I was a portfolio holder, we used to have Muslim burials in different sections of the graveyard. So as you can see now, you have a continuity all the way right to the border of Christians being buried. So you have a whole you can almost call it a Muslim section of the graveyard. So you are being buried close to one another. There isn't any sort of mixing going on at all. So everyone sort of from similar faiths are being buried to next to one another. So I don't think that's of an issue here in Luton.
And I guess one final question. I guess we're coming to close of the show, to the end of the show, really. So we talked about kind of like a different option. We talked about the Vale, but there's more cemeteries than the Vale in Luton, isn't that right, Councillor Aslam?
Yeah, there are more cemeteries, but they're full now. The only one that we've got with space is the Vale over in Stopsley.
Right, and then you're looking to extend that.
Yeah, exactly. So you've got cemeteries like over in Rothsay, and then over I think near Ickney Road, and there's few others across the town, but they're full, so that you don't get any burials there.
They're all full to capacity.
Yeah.
I guess final word from Haroon. If there was an alternative, or if there's an improvement in the service that's already provided by LSE, what would that be?
Sorry, I missed the last bit you said, Zaffar.
Yeah, I'm just saying if there was an improvement to be made to the service, right, that the LSE Loughborough Council is providing, what would that be? And what would be the alternative model? What would be the attraction? I mean, you mentioned a few things basically, right? And I think I think a lot of them, I think Councillor Aslam has said, are already catered for. So what would be the benefit of?
I mean, one of the things on there, I don't know if Councillor Aslam has been to Leicester Oadby, the graveyard there for the Muslims, and the facilities provided there. If Council wants to see a template, please go and have a look there. You'll find that there you've got on site the mortuary, you've got a prayer area on site. Various other things. I don't know about the weekend coroner signing thing, which Councillor Aslam helped drive in Luton. So I'm very thankful for him and Qazi Jissi Saab who did that. That was something recently that's been introduced, but things like that would definitely improve it.
Yeah, I mean, just to give an update, that building that now some of the funerals would take place, that is a dedicated building.
Okay, I'm going to have to. I've run out of time, so I'm going to have to call it a day. Thank you very much for participating in a really good discussion today. Jazakallah khair.
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Welcome.
Biscot Road, Luton. Call 457709.
Why do Tops Pizza deliver the top pizzas in Luton? For a start, all the toppings are 100% halal and Tops use fresh dough every day. Then there's the cheese, the highest quality available. And when it comes to food preparation, cleanliness is taken as part of our faith. So that just leaves the taste, choice, and great offers, including buy one, get one free on all medium, large, and extra large pizzas. Tops Pizzas, Wellington Street, LU1 5AA. Order online, topspizza.com or via Just Eat. Download our app or call 01582 72 5000.
Applications are now open for our September 21 reception class at King's House Independent School in Luton. It's where our dedicated and caring staff nurture young children in small classes, helping them to get the best start in life. And with our King's House School Early Learning Programme, we teach reading, writing and numeracy through a fun and enjoyable curriculum, whilst developing self-confidence and other talents too. If you'd like to apply for a place for your child, call Luton 491430 or click on kingshouseschool.co.uk.
Could you look your family in the eyes and tell them you're going out to exercise, not just meeting friends? That you only ever leave home when you really need to? Do you always keep a safe distance and wash your hands the moment you get back? Around 1 in 3 people who have COVID-19 have no symptoms and are spreading it without knowing. Sticking to the rules stops the spread. Stay home. Protect the NHS. Save lives.
खून जमा देने वाली सर्दी, शदीद बर्फबारी और तूफानी बारिशों के बाद सैलाब की सूरत हाल। मुल्क शाम की सर्दियां जानलेवा हैं। शाम के जरूरतमंदों को खुराक, गर्म कपड़े और कंबल पहुंचाने में एसकेटी की मदद कीजिए। आपके सिर्फ 20 पाउंड बेआसरा खानदानों के लिए बड़ा आसरा बन सकते हैं। कोरोना की मौलिक वबा और सर्द मौसम में अपने भाइयों को मुश्किलात से निकालने के लिए एसकेटी वेलफेयर की मदद करें। विजिट करें sktvwelfare.org या 0300 302 0786 पर कॉल करें।
A widow's marriage was arranged by her father without her consent. She did not like her new husband. When she approached the messenger, peace be upon him, he annulled the marriage.
From the studios of Inspire FM, the time is now 6:30.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back. You're listening to Inspire FM. This is Friday Night Live. My name is Zaffar Iqbal. Before the break, we were listening, we were talking or discussing the flooding of the local cemetery in Luton and what the council is doing to ensure that the flooding situation is kept under control. We had Councillor Aslam and Harun Kiani and Zaid Hussain, who also talked about the Muslim alternative as a cemetery. Okay, we're going to move on to another topic of discussion, which is close to the hearts of many residents in Luton. If you're from the Pakistani or Kashmiri community, 5th of February is designated as the Kashmir Solidarity Day. And we have with me Zaffar Hansab, is a lifelong campaigner for Kashmiri issues. And we're also going to be joined by Basit shortly to discuss, I guess, from a youngster's point of view, who's also hails from Kashmir, about what this day means and what its significance is. Can I welcome, first of all, Professor Zaffar Hansab. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam, Zaffar Saab.
Are you keeping well, Professor Saab?
Alhamdulillah, I'm keeping well, considering all things. But I pray that all of us come through this this pandemic safe and sound. But alas, as you know, and as your listeners will also know, that we have lost many close people who are near and dear, and so on, and friends and colleagues and relatives, not only in this town, but in Britain and elsewhere, in Kashmir and elsewhere as well. So,
indeed. Zaffar Saab, you're a lifelong campaigner, as I mentioned, about the Kashmir issue, and you have, perhaps you want to sort of give a little bit of a profile in terms of the recent activities that you've done in terms of writing letters to the UN, etc., highlighting the cause of Kashmir.
Well, I think Zaffar Saab, particularly since 5th of August 2019, when Indian government illegally annexed Indian occupied part of Jammu Kashmir, and also laid claim to the territories that are under Pakistani administration since 1947, 49, 48. And in contravention of all the United Nations resolutions and agreements with the people of Jammu and Kashmir at the time of the temporary accession in October 1947. And as you know, that Kashmir is a dispute between India and Pakistan. But as a learned colleague and friend, Dr. Nazir Gilani often writes that the dispute is between India and Pakistan, but Kashmiri people have the title. They are the owners of the land. Therefore, it is not a dispute between Kashmiri people and India or Kashmiri people. Kashmiri people have a dispute about their title. So, so India, since then we've engaged. All of us have engaged. Many people have engaged. The Kashmiris have been engaging regularly with their local MPs, even their councillors, and wherever they live. In our case, in Britain, with the British government, and also indeed in international institutions like the United Nations Human Rights Council and the Commissioner, United Nations Human Rights Commissioner, indeed the Secretary General of the United Nations as well, and other governments and heads of governments and so on and so forth. So this has been this has been a part and parcel of what people like myself have also been doing, and are continuing to do. And also there's this kind of interaction on the media, social media, as well as radio, TV, and so on.
So what does 5th of February mean
well,
to you?
I mean, I think this question should be best sort of I think directed to our Pakistani political establishment and people who are responsible. But it is I mean, I look at it as an annual kind of expression of solidarity of the Pakistani people rather than Pakistani governments or sort of that kind of engagement, because I think there are question marks on the sort of what was necessary to do and what could have been done and so on and so forth. But I think as Kashmiris, we look up to the 22 million people of Pakistan who have always been since 1947 very positive and constructively disposed towards the rights and aspirations of their Kashmiri neighbors and brethren. And I think I look at it in that context. But I think it over the years it has become just a kind of political event, just for political leaders and political parties, and I think it has to come out of that. Other than that, it has. There is an awareness that it generates also. And I hope, and I sort of would hope that it is more engaging with the rest of the world rather than engaging with people of Pakistan or people of Jammu and Kashmir.
Which I guess Imran Khan is trying to do in some ways, and I think he's.
Well, I don't look at it any leader specific in that sense, because you would appreciate that I am apolitical as far as Pakistan's governments and political parties are concerned, and so is my way of thinking over the years in terms of we have other kinds of expectations for incumbents as well as aspirants of governments in Pakistan, and in the past we've done the same, and I think I think there are some question marks, particularly since 5th of August 2019 about the maybe what was possible, what could have been possible as far as Pakistani governments are concerned and government is concerned.
Indeed. So if I can bring in Basit Mahmood. Basit, I guess you hail from a Kashmiri background or a Pakistani side of Kashmiri background. What does 5th of February mean to you?
I think it's important. I mean, I've already been kind of not told off, but said by several other people have said, you shouldn't be celebrating this day because the realities on the ground are different. But to me, look, I see it as another way of highlighting the plight of the Kashmiri people. And it's always been described as a kind of forgotten conflict by a lot of people. And I think, to me, it matters. But unfortunately, and Zaffar Saab's done a lot of work on this with other people long before I was born. But I think there's, I always say this, and I think it's important to say this, that when I speak to a lot, I mean, I'm 28, right? When I talk to other people who are my age or younger, I say to them, like, what do you think about Kashmir? And it's like, that's the place to go on holiday. They think that I go there for 4 weeks every summer, but there's an occupation. And people aren't aware. I think it's a way of kind of increasing that awareness. But I think sadly it's one of the, and I compare it to what was happening with the farmers' protest the other day. I include myself in this. I don't direct this at anyone in particular, but I think we've failed when it comes to internationalizing this issue the way we could have. If you look at Rihanna, could we imagine Rihanna speaking out about Kashmir? I mean, think about how much. Okay, whatever, she's a celebrity. I don't care what she does, but she's got a massive platform. And I think the younger generation of Kashmiri descent who are my age speak more about Palestine and the Uyghur situation. I'm not saying they shouldn't, but you don't really see that kind of activism amongst younger guys, especially when you go on university campuses, right? If you go to a university campus, you'll see a Palestine solidarity campus and the Tibetan movement, Hong Kong movement, but there's not really that kind of presence when it comes to Kashmir. And I think that's what we need to be looking at to kind of make. So
why do you think that is, if you were to analyze the situation?
I think it's just I think one is, it's not, as I said, in the media. Look, I work in the media, right? And I've worked in.
I mean, we could talk about the media, but I mean, to be honest, we as a community, right? We are in the town, at least anyway, we're numerous, right? Sure. And if our youngsters in the town aren't engaged, right, you can't blame the media for that, can you?
No, and I agree with you. But why would they be engaged? How many of our youngsters have been invited to these meetings often? How many young people have we seen on leadership positions on these very issues? And the thing is, again, this is a side point. The Luton Borough Council hadn't even adopted the definition on Islamophobia that most other councils up and down the country had adopted. And it was only after I asked that they were like, okay, we've moved. And that happened this year. And this is a council, so numbers don't mean anything. But, and the other failing when it comes to that is, you know, and again, I'm including myself in this. I'm not saying that, you know, I've not done this, but other people have asked, you know, I learned about Kashmir when I went to university. No one in the community told me about it. I didn't even know that there was something going on. But it was only after, and I think we've become an echo chamber. You know, you asked why. One of my analysis is, what use is it writing about the Kashmir issue in the Jung newspaper, right? Do you think people of the younger generation, A, speak or read Urdu? I mean, they do, but it's not as high a proportion as it used to be. And do you think they also kind of read those newspapers? Or are we just preaching to the converted? You know, we have these dinners about Kashmir and a lot of, you know, old men come, they have food, and that's where it ends.
So Zaffar Sahib, is that a fair critique of the situation that the older generation, although they have been committed to the cause, they've not enthused the young generation?
I think there is something in it. I mean, I take Basad's point, but I think Kashmir issue is a victim of so many factors, and I think there are also you know, issues around the British Kashmiris, or the whole idea of being a Kashmiri in Britain or Kashmiri in the diaspora. I mean, I've you know, I sort of set the, in fact, the very first PhD course on Kashmiri identity in this country or anywhere else in the world in what was our local university called as the Luton University then, and also you know, we published quite a number of you know, things and so on. But I think there is something in it, and there are also I think there are I mean, I think we as a community have a responsibility which we have not lived up to. And community, when I say community, I mean there are about perhaps a million of us. We have a census coming up in March, and there is again quite a robust campaign about identity, you know, self-ascription, and people have since the mid 90s have been actually campaigning with the Office of National whatever it is, statistics, ONS, and even I went to one of the meetings based on my my papers and so on and so forth as a kind of an expert on identity. But I think seriously, the idea has not caught on amongst the British Kashmiris in the especially in the younger lot, and in the 90s I used to sort of have a very long discussions and heated discussions with the Hizb Tahrir people who had their own ideas, and actually they creamed off a lot of very talented sort of youth, and very sort of a cream of the Kashmiri and indeed Muslim youth, and so on and so forth. And I suppose, you know, and they used to come and heckle our meetings, the public meetings, with all kinds of
many meetings,
many meetings, and they used to come and heckle
Sorry to interrupt, but I mean, I think part of the issue, I guess, is that we talk about the Kashmir issue without telling people what the Kashmir issue is. So why should tell me why you should care about Kashmiris?
I think Zaffar, you are right, partly right, but I think whenever we have this kind of seminars and stuff, I mean, people do talk about the Kashmir issue. Kashmir issue started, the current sort of Kashmir issue started in.
What's the problem? What's the problem in Kashmir at the moment? Why should our listeners perk up the ears and listen? What is going on in Kashmir?
At the moment, let me say that at the heart of the Kashmir issue lies the right of the Kashmiri people to decide on the political future of their homeland or their state or their country or their former kingdom, because it was a kingdom until 1953 and so on and so forth. Although it was partly a kingdom, but already divided since 1949 between India and Pakistan. But that basically is the crux of it, and the issue is also at the United Nations with over 20 UN resolutions that bind India and Pakistan to ensure that the people of Kashmir have the opportunity to decide on their future status. And the other point is that people need to perhaps know that both India and Pakistan are UN's proxies in Kashmir, and the areas that they have under their control or occupation or whatever you want to call it are basically areas that they have responsibility over as proxy of the United Nations to run and administer until the plebiscite or the referendum takes place. Now the sort of dispute is based on that at the moment, and I would like to echo or I'd like to quote Dr. Nazir Gilani. He says a dispute is between India and Pakistan because both countries claim the land and the state, whereas the Kashmiris have the title to it. They are the owners. They have the ownership of the land, and it is they who must decide. And therefore, you could say, Zaffar Sahab, you could say that the sovereignty of the Kashmir lies with the Kashmiri people, or they have the sovereign right to decide. And I think that.
Can I bring Boss in? Boss in.
You just asked a very simple question. I think this is part of the issue.
Hold on a second. Here's the crux of the matter, right? Now, Muslims the Palestinians have sympathies of the Muslims, right? The Uyghur have the sympathies of the Muslims, right? Because they see images of young kids being shot, basically, right? Right, and they see images of people in concentration camps, right? And they can sympathize because there is a connection, right? You start talking about, who's got the right to territory, United Nations, this and that. That's all above the head, really, isn't it? It's the narrative I think that's being missed.
You've asked a very simple question. I'll just give listeners a very clear-cut reason as to why they should hear. And I'm surprised that we didn't hear any of these stats. That there's 6,000 unmarked graves in Indian-occupied Kashmir. 1 in 6 Kashmiris, according to Human Rights Watch, right? Human Rights Watch is a non-Muslim. Don't worry, it's not Muslim. It's not partial. Human Rights Watch says 1 in 6 Kashmiris have been tortured. The Armed Forces Special Powers Act. Women have been raped in Kashmir, and not a single soldier has been tried because of the impunity given to them by the Armed Forces Special Powers Act. So this is the thing. These are some of the, they've had the longest running shutdown of internet in any democracy. The internet was cut from Delhi, right? And Rihanna, the whole world kicked up fuss. So these are the key facts we should be talking about.
Here's another problem I've got with this, right? Is that we talk up the Kashmiri issue, right? We see people, in the streets, right? And then we say the internet was cut. Well, I think the common person says, well, so what?
Yeah, and they would say that.
So what's the big issue? The internet was cut.
The big issue is obviously communications, but also you got to remember in a mountainous terrain like that, I think these MSF released a report saying that the doctors couldn't access patients because they used to do it, for example, via WhatsApp, right? Isolated terrain. People were dying from conditions like heart attacks and stuff because the internet was down. People couldn't share human rights violations because the internet was down. You talk about online learning.
But where are the images, right, of young kids being shot?
Yeah, that's a very good question.
Right. Where are people taking up the case of I think his name was Abdul Duha, right, who was shot carrying behind his father in Palestine, right? Where are those? If you want to enthuse people, right, if you want to raise the profile of the Kashmiris, right, that sort of stuff needs to come out in the air. You can't talk about territorial claims.
Here's the thing, right? That those pictures do exist. I used to print those pictures when I was working at the Metro, and I used to write that. I know those pictures exist. The issue is the Kashmiri leadership in the UK. You've got more groups. You've got so many groups need to ask themselves when they send a press release to a news. And I've seen some of them, right? There's no pictures attached. There's 4,000 words on different statements from different people, and then we're wondering why we haven't managed to get the media on board.
So Zaffar Sahib, is this a case of missing the point, right, about the Kashmiri struggle?
No, partly there are issues with how we have actually managed or how we present our case. And of course, I think also we should not underestimate the kind of, if you know, I mean, in Urdu you could say vabastagi, or the kind of attachment with the issue itself, and how people have actually engaged over the years. But I think there is a lack of the kind of, if you like, the method of engagement, and so on. As far as I think your question about what is the big idea. The big idea is that it is the fundamental right of the people to decide, and all these human rights is, the right of self-determination itself is a basic human right, and you deny that, and all the other human rights actually become denied as well. And that is exactly that. Kashmir is a classic in that sense. And if we go back to the current situation on 5th of August 2019, I mean, between February 2019 and 5th of August, Indian armed forces and paramilitary and military forces, from around 500,000 to 600,000, they increased to about 900,000, which is the figure today, estimated figure. Could be more. And they have, particularly in the valley of Kashmir, and also on the rim, and also the valley when it touches other parts of, say, like the Chenab Valley and Pir Panjal area, over the Pir Panjal ranges. You have a complete kind of a siege and lockdown of a kind of normal life. And this is between sort of I think up to about 9 million people. And these are, since 5th of August 2019, a kind of under siege. It's an iron curtain. I've called it iron curtain, as Churchill would, used to say that an iron curtain has descended on Eastern Europe, in reference to Soviet hegemony in that region. That is exactly what has happened. This army has laid a kind of siege. So you could say that there's one soldier to every sort of 9 Kashmiris, or every household as a soldier assigned to it, in that sense. Now the other, I mean, I think that is a kind of, if you like, current urgency, and I think there is a lot of awareness around that. I mean, Basit mentioned about the unnamed graves, and it's about, a figure is between 7 to 8,000, and then there are 8,000 missing persons. So you can correlate that those missing person are, in those unnamed graves. And some of the parents and relatives are still asking for answers from the Indian authorities of people who were picked up in 1991 or 90 and 92, and missing parents, for example, they have a missing parents organization, Parveena Iyengar, who's an international figure, and her son was, I think, picked up by the police, BSF, the Indian Border Security Force, which is another paramilitary, in 1991, and she's still looking for him and asking, and she's got no answers. Now she has spoken at various international arena. She's spoken in Oslo, in other places, and I'm not sure where else she went, but whether she came to Britain or not. But she has, outside of India, she has spoken, and she's she was a young woman in 1991 when her son was abducted or taken away by the police, and then never came back. And she's now in her, I think, 30 years on. She's an elderly woman, and there are other parents. And currently, many of the detainees, including political leaders, they are held in solitary confinement in the Tihar jail. Others are held maybe 1,500 kilometers away from their homes, and it is absolutely impossible for parents to actually even afford a trip, let alone visit them. And I think there is those dimensions, human right dimensions, are actually are horrendous. And I think the more people get to know about these things, the more they become sort of incensed. And I think Rihanna, I think the Sikhs, we should give them the due. And also the farmers movement in India has really picked up over the past 2 months, because it is not confined just to the Punjab and Haryana, which is the real sort of if you like, the breadbasket of India. But the Sikhs are symbolic of this of this farmers movement. And the Sikh lobby and the Sikh activism is pretty, I think, admirable, not only in this country but also in the States.
Sure, but Basit, I think we've got about 30 seconds to wrap up to say, how can this be moved up the agenda? I know politicians are aware of this, but there's no movement, I guess.
I can't remember who said it, but if someone said if you destroy the Shabab, meaning the younger generation, that no movement has a future. And if you can't articulate this vision to the younger people, stop preaching to those who are already converted, stop writing in newspapers that barely anyone reads, and start going out your comfort zones and attracting those who you need from outside your comfort zones, younger people especially.
I think most people now engage in social media, and those papers that Basit mentions. I mean, even I'm nearly knocking 7-0, and I don't read those papers.
I have to call it a day today. Thank you, Zaffar Saab, Basit. It's been a really good discussion today. I apologize if I've offended anybody. I got a little bit sort of emotional there, but this is a really important day. Jazakallah khair, and inshallah, we'll see you again. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you. Walaikum salam.
Assalamu alaikum. In Luton and its surrounding areas, it is now time for Salat al-Isha.
Luton और इसके मज़ाफ़ात में नमाज़े इशा का वक्त हुआ चाहता है.
This azan has been sponsored by Ideal Properties. Contact us on 01582 721110 or log on to www.idealpropertiesltd.co.uk.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. لا إله إلا الله.
اللهم رب هذه الدعوة التامة والصلاة القائمة آت محمدا الوسيلة والفضيلة وابعثه مقاما محمودا الذي وعدته.
Would you like to sponsor the Azan? If so, give us a call on 01582 481 810 or email us on info@inspirefm.org.
From the studios of Inspire FM, the time is now 7 o'clock.
Broadcasting live to Luton and the surrounding areas, and internationally through our website, Facebook, and nationally through our partner radio stations in Peterborough, Derby, Sheffield and Nottingham, Radio Salam in Peterborough, Radio Khlas in Derby, Link FM in Sheffield, Radio Dawn in Nottingham. Welcome to our listeners in those towns. Right, before the break, we talked about 5th of February, the Kashmir Solidarity Day. And I guess the gist of the conversation was that the message is getting out there. There is show of solidarity between Pakistan, Pakistani community and Kashmiri community in Pakistan. But beyond that, the message needs to be a little more succinct to engage some of the younger audiences, etc. So that was the crux of the discussion. We want to move on to our next topic of discussion. We want to talk about, I guess, remote learning again. We talked about it before. We want to talk about it again. And what we want to focus on really is the enablement, first of all, of remote learning, the facilities that are available. But in particular, I want to focus today on what is being lost. Are our kids losing their I guess the education and the learning platforms, etc., that they'll have. So that's the key, I guess, topic of discussion today. I've got a plethora of guests today. Perhaps if I was to introduce all of them, I'd be here all day, but I'll introduce them as I go along. All right. Can I welcome you all to Inspire FM and Friday Night Live? Right.
Hi, Tarek.
Hi. Hi. How are you? Right. So we've got that was Jane from Level Trust. And we've got Rihanna Faisal as well, and we got Dr. Sarah De Freitas. We've got Daniel O'Connor from the Chorley School, head of Chorley, and we have the High Sheriff of Bedfordshire, Sue Lusada. I hope I've said everybody's names correctly. If I can first of all start off by talking about, I guess, the capabilities, the enablement of a remote learning, and the devices that are required to be able to do that. So we've got Rihanna Faisal and Jane from Level Trust to talk about their campaign, I guess, to ensure that people who haven't got the capability are provided with some sort of a means to be able to get some sort of education. So perhaps you can talk about, again, I know we've talked about it in our shows before, but just briefly describe again what your campaign is and how far down the road you've got with it.
Well, Zaffar, if you don't mind, I think both of us would rather defer that question to Sue.
Okay, all right, fine.
Okay, that's kind of you. How far have we got? Well, we started in this project started in March last year, and how far have we got now? Well, across the county, we've delivered 1,500 devices to schools across Bedfordshire. Today alone, we delivered 550, of which 169 of those were into Luton schools. All of that has been done by raising money from local individuals, businesses, groups, local trusts. It's been amazing. And with the help of Jane and Rahana, we've been able to bring that connectivity to children that without that wouldn't have the ability to learn?
For some feedback for yourself, I'm a governor at one of the schools, and this school actually referred some of their students to the Learning Trust. So the name's out there, people are aware of it, and I guess they're drawing on the benefits. So I guess Rihanna and Jane, the campaign has, I guess, come a long way. I guess it was launched some months ago. What more to be done?
You know, Sue has given some remarkable numbers there, particularly given that, you know, those devices have come from the community. So it's the community giving back to the community is how we've got to where we are. And Inspire FM were involved in our campaign at the end of last year, you know, with Luton Mosque, where I think we managed to raise it in that period almost £30,000. And I think almost all of the devices, I'll let Jane come back on that, but many of the devices, she'll know the exact numbers, but many of the devices that we gave into Luton today were from the Inspire FM and Luton Mosque Discover Islam campaign. But we know from speaking to schools and the sheer number of requests we had in from schools that we were only able to meet a fraction of those. And speaking to schools, so we were all out today speaking to teachers and head teachers at schools who were obviously extremely grateful for what we were giving them, but all of them were telling us about many other children who didn't have access to digital devices, or that they were in a home where perhaps, you know, there's 4 children and one or two devices, which makes it really hard to manage the workload of children, because obviously schools want to try and cover as much curriculum as practically possible whilst children are away from school. You know, and that takes some time and effort, but, you know, they've also got to be mindful that there's varying access to tech out there. And in Luton, unfortunately, it's still very much, you know, an uphill struggle.
Mm-hmm. So I guess the problem is twofold, isn't it? The problem is the devices, and I guess the Wi-Fi element of it as well, isn't it? That's a problem. I'm not sure. Are you addressing that side of it as well, or is it just the devices?
We are. Yeah, Jane, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I think it's been a real partnership approach with schools, actually, Luton Learning Link. And I'd like to take this opportunity to say that schools have done an absolutely fantastic job across Luton and Bedfordshire and beyond, supporting their children in ways they've never, ever had to before. And a lot of schools have actually dug in their own pockets and provided Wi-Fi for children who've needed it. There are also several schemes providing Wi-Fi that different children can access, and those schemes are now much more widely available to families than they were in the first lockdown. But there is definitely still a gap, and it's a gap that we have not been able to fill nearly as much as we wanted to, and that is because the digital divide in this country is absolutely huge. It is a massive gap. And just to give you some numbers to what Rahana was saying, we have had about 550 applications in 3 weeks. Just 3 weeks, we've had 550 applications from schools across Luton for individual children. We've only been able to, in this round, fulfill 160 of those. And just to give you an idea of the decision-making process for us, we were having to choose between children who had one broken device to share between 4 at home and a child who had only a smartphone. And they're heartbreaking decisions to have to make. And I think it is a celebration today, because 160 more children now have access to a device who didn't have one before. And actually 135 of those were provided by Luton Council of Mosques and the fundraising they did. So if it wasn't for our incredible community and their generosity, many of those children wouldn't have got a device today. So it is a day to celebrate, but it is also a day to look forward and think there is still a long way to go. in our town and actually nationally, I would say, to provide devices to children who need them. And that's not something that charity can do or the community can do on our own. And I, in terms of Wi-Fi, it's part of the issue. You know, if you've got a device but you don't have internet connection, then it's still pretty useless, isn't it? So both things really need to be tackled.
Indeed. Okay, Danny, if I can bring you in, so I guess this lockdown has been in some ways better than the previous lockdown, because previous lockdown children were all out of school. Now they've got some sort of a capability of learning remotely. But how have you had to cope with the question that some of the children may not have devices? So you've kind of built an online kind of like schooling capability, but there's a certain proportion of people who won't be able to draw on it. How have you been able to sort of get around that situation?
Yeah, it's really challenging, Zaffar. I mean, first of all, to pick up your initial point, you're absolutely right that things are working much better on this second lockdown. I think on the first lockdown back in March, schools didn't really know what they were doing. You know, they had to completely almost reinvent themselves in a virtual environment in a very short space of time. And there was an even greater shortage of devices. And I think at that stage, and I suspect Rahana and Sue and Jane will recognise this, we didn't really understand the depth of the issues that we were facing with respect to the digital divide. And what we're finding on the second lockdown is that the virtual attendance levels and the virtual engagement levels with online learning are exponentially higher than they were in the first lockdown. Now, that's partly because schools have got better. You know, they've learned very quickly through that first lockdown in terms of how to improve their offer. But it undoubtedly is also to do with the fact that society has managed to increase access and close that digital divide a little bit. I mean, if like Jane, I give you a few numbers. At Chorley High School for Boys, we've so far issued 307 devices out to students. Now, of those 307, we've received 163 through the DFE, and we've given 80 out from our own resources. But 64 of those devices have come by charities, with Luton Learning Link certainly being the biggest contributor to that, alongside Bananas and Crisis Aid. Now, 307, that's almost a third of our whole school population. And what we're finding is that the more we meet the needs, we kind of scratch away at the problem, and we see that the problem's even deeper. I mean, Rahana's already mentioned the issue of multiple laptops required in one household, and that's becoming more and more apparent as schools get better and better at the remote learning, because then there's then more and more demand for the devices. And you know, and that's before we get on to again, you're quite right to highlight that, the whole issue of internet access as well. I mean, even with a very grateful recipient of another 19 laptops today from the Luton Learning Link, we've still got 60 students waiting for laptops, 21 waiting for internet access that we're trying to resolve at the moment. So it's a massive issue. I'll sort of finish off. Just very quickly, sorry, Zaffar, say that, you know, we've got to start regarding access to laptops and the internet as being the same as access to running water, access to electricity. It's becoming that fundamental to families to be able to survive in our current society, for children to learn. And until we make that conceptual switch in terms of how we view the internet, then it's going to be very difficult to make significant progress, I think.
Right. So up the political agenda, you're saying, really, rather than, you know, sort of, I guess the efforts are always welcome of individuals and charities, etc. But politicians need to step in and make this more of a utility rather than being an optional extra. So the 60 people that haven't got access to laptops or internet, how have you been able to sort of provide education for them? Have you made some separate arrangements, or?
Yes, we deliver work, you know, in terms of hard copy They have some access because often it's restricted. They'll have maybe one laptop to share between a number of them. We do a lot of contacting with families and working with them over the phone, and a few also come into school to join because you'll know that schools are partially open to the children of key workers and vulnerable children, and we've been able to support some of them in that way as well. But we're a long way away from fully meeting the needs of those 60 students at the moment. And again, I don't think we know how many more there are, because again, the first lockdown, when you ask the question of a student, have you got a computer at home? And they may have one computer at home, may not be a very good computer, and it may be being shared between the whole family, but they will answer yes. And so you think, oh, right, that family's okay. And it's only as you start getting deeper and deeper into the process, you recognise that actually, no, it's not okay, that they're really struggling.
Okay. If I can bring Dr. Zara in now. Dr. Zara, it's been almost a year now, right, where children have effectively been outside of the learning settings. Are we able to assess what kind of damage that's done to the education of our children? Is there a way to do that?
Yeah, it's very difficult, and of course, some of the students will be in key stage 4 or 5, so they'll be looking to do their GCSEs or their A levels, and those are the most affected children, obviously, at this stage, because missing almost a year of school, as some kids have, sadly, that will obviously set them back. There's been a couple of studies actually looking at this, and they think that the long-term impact could be quite damaging to the whole generation, because missing. I mean, I think most of us here know, if you missed one class in maths, you could miss a really critical piece of trigonometry or algebra or something, and then that could affect your understanding for your whole understanding of maths, of your whole life. So, and I've been in situations, even myself. I can remember, one of my teachers went on maternity leave. Quite a happy thing to do, but I dropped a grade because of that. So imagine then, losing a whole year of study. It is the damage is going to be considerable. And of course, people are making that sort of link with the Second World War, where of course people did miss, up to 4 years of education in that period. So, and of course the damage on their education was significant, and of course the knock-on effect in society as well. I think we've got to work really hard to make sure that we can get the catch-up in place as soon as possible for those who have missed vital schooling. And I know the government is looking at funding in this space, and this is something which is being looked at the moment. And I think we really need to push hard for that. And make sure that every child has the capability to catch up, particularly the ones that are in, those critical exam years, because obviously otherwise the long-term impact could be quite significant. And of course, there's a knock-on effect. It's not just about where they are now. It's their impact on when they then move to A levels, when they then move to degree level. There's going to be a knock-on effect in the education system, and of course, universities have also been affected by what's happening. Yeah. So I think it's going to be really critical to make sure that those children get all the support they can. And, I completely advocate all of the laptops being sent out to those that need them, and to really try to maximise that programme of work. And, the government have just announced a £2 billion school rebuilding project today. I mean, let's have a look and see, how much more money can we put into the laptop programme, which they already have running, and make sure that the connectivity is going to be sufficient in order to support online education going forward.
So, Daniel, if I can come back to you again. So we've talked about laptops, and we talked about the Wi-Fi and remote learning as a necessity for the moment, right? It's a need at the moment. But are you convinced that the quality of education that you're able to deliver is anywhere near what's expected?
That's a very difficult question to answer, Zaffar. In some ways, yes. In some ways, better. I mean, I had a very interesting conversation with a family today whose son is actually thriving better because of his particular sort of cognitive context, as it were, thriving better in this remote environment than he does when he's having to, face the social challenges of school. Others, absolutely not. I think that the big challenge, there are two big challenges we face, Zaffar. One big challenge is so much more difficult in this remote situation, special situation, to be responsive and adaptive and flexible to the individual needs of students and groups as they present themselves, because we haven't got that ongoing dynamic dialogue to nearly the same extent as we have if they're with us. And the second issue is that a lot of learning often takes place as a social activity. It requires discussion and interaction and, kinesthetic movement and things like that. And again, it's very difficult to replicate that. And of course, the third thing is that those students who possibly struggle to motivate themselves without, a teacher looking over their shoulder or other peers who are driving them on, I think it's much more difficult to motivate them to stick at the work. So yeah, there are all sorts of constraints. And I think moving forwards, actually, we will be wanting to move into a situation where we're blending a lot of this provision, even once we're all sort of back to normal, because I think we've learned a lot about different ways of teaching, and children and families are discovering a lot about different ways of learning as well.
And I think one thing we notice is that even now, and correct me if I'm wrong, even now, the lessons aren't, should we say, remotely face-to-face, if you see what I mean. So there isn't a teacher sitting on the other side of the camera throughout the hour and teaching the kids. It's delivery of lessons and then marking them at a later stage. Why has that model been chosen as opposed to having somebody sitting in front of a camera and delivering the lesson for the hour as you would in a classroom?
Well, it's actually a blend of all those things, Zaffar. There are some situations where you would have, the teacher sitting there live in very specific contexts. So the way in which we define live teaching and learning is quite complex. So it might be that as we are now, you've got the teacher on video, the students on video in the background. Now that carries with it all sorts of challenges and potential dangers as well, in terms of safeguarding issues and confidentialities and sort of peering into people's bedrooms and all that kind of thing. So that's a particular issue. But actually also it's not necessarily the best way of being able to respond to the individuals in your classroom, because as long as I'm on a camera teaching quite didactically to a group of people, we're not getting an awful lot of interaction going on. What we do a lot of in the schools is it's a live lesson in the sense that the teacher is in the Google Classroom at the same time as the students. The dialogue is taking place over chat. It's using things like Loom videos so that there are recordings then of the teacher presenting the part of the lesson that needs to be presented, with the students able, while the teacher's there, also to put questions in the post and so on. We have a thing called Moat, where we're able to actually do real-time assessment by voice in those live lessons. So it's actually quite flexible, and counterintuitively, it's more flexible, probably, the teacher not being live on camera than it would be if the teacher were live on camera. And again, that's just a kind of a flavour of a lot of the nuances and differences that we are adapting to and getting used to working with. So it's not as straightforward as just a live lesson or not a live lesson.
Indeed. Okay, so if I could come back to I guess, Sister Rihanna, I'm going to get slightly political, right, on this fundraising campaign that we have. So I guess that the question that comes to mind is that the governments have known, right, that this is coming, right, that they're going to have to provide some devices, etc., because the COVID was here for a long, over the long period. So aren't you providing in some ways a way out for the governments to say, well, there are opportunities there for the government, for the third sector, the charity sector, to provide this, and the governments to just stand back? Are you not providing that excuse for them?
Well, it's good
should it not be a provision? Should it not be a provision that government provide?
I hear your question, and it's probably good that you came to me for the politics. I suspect others on the call would be would be less able to respond. So there will always be these questions about the balance between what the state should provide and what the charitable and third sector should provide. I absolutely agree that the work that's being done by Luton Learning Link, by a number of charities, should have been done by the state. I would, whether people think this is pie in the sky, I believe that every young person should have access to their own digital device, because it's Daniel has articulated it so well. It's just such a basic, fundamental need, of our times. A child that isn't equipped to deal with a digital future isn't really equipped, for success. So these are kind of really vital things that absolutely the government should provide. The moral question for us is that whilst we wait for that response to come or perhaps not come, we have, a generation of young people missing out.
Just a quick question for Susan in that case. Then I guess you're part of the political structure. I'm not. And what influence are you using to actually trying to get that message across to the politicians?
Well, because I can't speak politically, but what I have been able to do is I have been able to engage with them and explain what we're doing, but also more than anything is gain their support for understanding that there is a problem. And also by working with the children's services, each children's service across the county, we've been able to discuss what the future strategy is going to be. And that's a really positive thing.
I'm really sorry. I've been told that I only got 15 seconds left, so I really have to sort of thank you all for contributing to the discussion today. Perhaps we'll talk to each other again in the future. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Listeners, we're going to take a short break and we'll be back after these short messages. Thank you.
This program will continue after the break. Continue listening to Inspire FM. Inspire FM.
Inspire 105.1.
Hello, my name is Yasmina. I'm from London. Keep listening to Inspire on 105.1 FM. Woo!
With Golden Globe, the efficient energy partner that can help you access government grants, you can turn your drafty, cold and expensive to run home into one where you can enjoy warmth and comfort for less. Whether you're a homeowner or landlord of rental property, you could be entitled to up to £10,000 towards external wall, cavity and underfloor insulation. Homeowners can claim up to 100% grants for broken boilers, and your Golden Globe survey is free. For details, call 0800 999 5097 or click on goldenglobeltd.com.
COVID-19 cases are rising across Bedfordshire and hospital admissions are now higher than ever. We must all play our part to stop the virus spreading and save lives. Please stay at home. The virus can spread when we have contact with other people, so limit contact as much as you can. If you have to go out, remember hands, face, space. Wash your hands, wear a face covering in enclosed spaces, and keep your distance from others. 1 in 3 people don't show symptoms, but can still pass it on, so act as if you have it to protect your family, your friends, and your community. For more information, visit bedford.gov.uk/COVID-19.
Hi folks, Assalamu alaikum. This is Dr. Bilal Phillips, and I hope you're enjoying yourself.
Did you see that guy on TV?
What, that no comment guy?
Yeah, he was sick. What was his name?
I think it was Atiq Malik.
Yeah, Atiq Malik of Liberty Law Solicitors. Atiq Malik heads up the criminal law team at Liberty Law Solicitors, specialising in everything from serious crime down to road traffic offences.
To find out more or for a free telephone consultation, call 01582 459955.
Liberty Law, there when you need us most.
Crescent Hall, a large, elegant venue in the heart of Luton. As well as a grand banqueting hall, Crescent Hall provides you with kitchen facilities, a bridal room, a family room, as well as a prayer room. Ideal for conferences, weddings, mehndi and engagement parties. We have ample parking for guests. Our rates are highly competitive. Contact us today for a personalised quote. Call us on 01582 72 33 86. For further information, visit us at www.crescenthall.co.uk or email us at info@crescenthall.co.uk. Crescent Hall, adding comfort and style to your event.
ما في أنفسكم أو تخفوه يحاسبكم به الله.
Ali is one of those children who, with your assistance, has the honour of being a Hafiz. And that too from only £29 per month. Help UKIM by sponsoring a Hafiz and get rewarded by up to 70 times blessings. For donations, call now or visit ukim.org.
इतदाल हुर्रियत और हक की आवाज़ हमेशा गालिब रही है और यही आवाज़ हमेशा गालिब रहेगी। आइए और सुनिए हक की आवाज़। मैं हूं इमाम हाफिज इजाज़ अहमद, सुनाऊंगा आपको प्रोग्राम आवाज़ाए हक में हक की आवाज़, हर सोमवार 11 बजे से 12 बजे तक, ओनली ऑन इंस्पायर FM 105.1।
From the studios of Inspire FM, the time is now 7:30.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back. You're listening to Friday Night Live. My name is Zaffar, and this is Inspire FM. Welcome to all our listeners up and down the country and internationally. Before the break, we were discussing the use of devices for online learning, and we were discussing with Learning Link their campaign to provide devices for children who do not have them at home at the moment. And we also talked about the impact of the impact of learning remotely on education and kids being away from school. So that was before the break. Now we're going to talk about another topic which is close to my heart, and I guess the hearts of many listeners in Luton. You've heard of you must have heard of Sister Amani, who had a really bright future ahead of her, but tragically she contracted a brain tumor, and she's been in and out of hospitals for the last 6 months or a year. We have her father Khuram with us. Khuram used to be part of the Radio Ramadan Inspire FM team some years ago, and he's been coping with I guess this really tragic news for the last 6 months to a year or so. So can I welcome Khuram? Assalamu alaikum, Khuram.
Assalamu alaikum. How are you?
Alhamdulillah. How are you? You keeping well?
Yeah, I do have Amani with me, so she'll probably contribute a little bit. Sometimes it's nice to hear from her. I mean, this is probably her first attempt at speaking publicly about her condition, so quite a brave step.
Yeah, welcome Amani, welcome to the show, and I'm really pleased that you've been able to make it to talk to us today. Walaikum salam. Right, we also have Hugh Adams. He's an expert in I guess cancerous diseases. Yes, we'll also be speaking to him about what's I guess the impact of these types of illnesses and what can be done. So if I can ask Khuram first of all, just to give us a quick update on where we are. I know when we spoke last time, you were campaigning to raise some funds for some, I guess, cutting edge treatment, genetic treatment. So how has that fared? Has that gone down?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether your viewers will all know. I mean, it might be an idea if I just for a first minute or so just give a little bit of history.
Sure,
okay?
sure, yeah, no problem. Yeah, no problem.
Listening here for the first time. So Amani's my eldest. On her 22nd birthday on the 29th of April last year, 2020, she had a seizure. So until then, she'd not really had any real signs other than mild headaches if she was ill. It was in the lockdown, so we weren't allowed inside the hospital. She was taken, she had another seizure in the ambulance and was taken for a CT or an MRI scan, where they spotted some sort of unusual tumor growth. We then received a telephone call and called in, where we were told that it appeared to be a cancerous brain tumor. And from there, she was transferred to Central London Hospital in Queen Square, where she stayed for 12 days. They did a biopsy and they confirmed that she had a glioblastoma multiforme, a grade 4, which is probably the most aggressive type of brain tumor. They said that because of where it was near the brainstem, it was inoperable and incurable, and they gave a prognosis really of around 12 to 18 months. And then from there they just referred us to the standard of care, which is offered to everyone, which is radiotherapy and chemotherapy. She completed that in July, but unfortunately her tumor had grown by about 94%, so clearly hadn't worked. The purpose of that sort of treatment really is to buy more time, not really to cure the cancer. And from there we did a GoFundMe page, as you know, which raised over £100,000 in 24 hours to enable us to buy a phase 2 trial drug called ONC201 from Germany. So Armani's been on that for about 5 months now. And in her most recent scan, which was last week, it had shown about 8% reduction in size.
Wow.
They don't class that as regression of the tumor. It's not big enough. If it's 30% or more, then they'd class it as shrinkage. But it's a start, because normally with these sort of tumors, they tend to continue growing. That's what an aggressive tumor is. Armani unfortunately had a slight relapse. Last week, she ended up back in hospital because she'd had a seizure. She spent 7 days in hospital and was released on just yesterday, on the 3rd of February. Yeah. And she had 2 or 3 seizures. What they've put it down to really is they felt that she'd contracted some sort of infection, not COVID, which brought on these seizures. So we've had a difficult week, really, for Armani and for us. It's kind of gone backwards a bit, but we're working our way forward. And like I said, Armani's bravely agreed to take part and give you a bit of background about the impact of her illness on her. I mean, when you're ready, I'll obviously let her have a brief say.
Yeah, I'm more than happy, to be honest, whenever you're ready to, whenever Armani's ready to say.
I think the biggest impact is probably that, like Dad mentioned, I was, alhamdulillah, very healthy beforehand, hadn't taken really any trips to the doctors. I just graduated from the University of Leicester and had a first-class law degree. And I'd started my master's in social work because I decided that I didn't really want to go into the legal field anymore. And then I also had a wedding in the pipeline, and the family decided that they no longer wanted to go ahead with it once I fell ill. So within the blink of an eye, pretty much my whole life was turned upside down.
Oh, wow.
I went from being the big sister to now being the one that everyone needed to look after, and I'm still kind of, dealing with that. It's uncomfortable for me always having everyone do everything for me. I was very used to being independent. I moved away from home when I went to uni as well. So just pretty much everything you can imagine was taken away overnight because we didn't have any warning that this was going to happen. But I kind of guess what life is like.
So you've had tremendous amount of support. I mean, you've had lots of people. Obviously, the fundraiser is one aspect, over £100,000 in 24 hours. But there's lots of people who are, commenting on all sorts of social media and looking out for you. I mean, has that sort of helped in any way?
Yeah, definitely. There's been a lot of blessings that have come out of this, traumatic situation. Like you said, people can be so cruel, but so many people, strangers, have been so kind and made so many donations, and just the blessing of having my family and having a home that I can be in when I am out of hospital, the support of the family, the community. It's just been I can't believe it. I really can't believe it. And I don't think, like I said, someone my age, you don't really ever step back and kind of think that you will fall ill or that life will ever end. Really, you just kind of carry on. And I think
I have to admit, I've been sort of following your story, and I think you've shown tremendous courage, to be honest. And the fact that you are here talking on the radio about your experiences, etc., is really, really. I find that inspirational, to be honest. Really inspirational.
yeah,
If I can,
see it
sorry, go ahead.
I don't see it like that, because I think it's one of those things where until you're in that situation, you would just, you know, as much as I hate to admit it, maybe if I had seen someone else's story, I would have just, you know, scrolled past or not, you know. Now I'm in this situation. You have no choice but to step up and try and help. That's what I want to do. There's too many other families that are suffering, and they're in worse positions than me. Just today, someone that we came into contact with that had the same condition as me, he had his janaza funeral, was only 22,
21,
21.
20, just turned 22, hadn't he?
Just turned 22, and he wasn't able to take the trial medication because for his mutation, that's not an option. So there are people that have it and families that have it even worse than me. So if there is anything I can do, you know, that gives me some strength to hopefully be able to make a difference.
Alhamdulillah. If I can bring Hugh in. Hugh, I guess this kind of tumor, I guess, this kind of illness, is that common? What's the, in your research, you know, have you found lots of cases like that? And then, you know, how I guess, has the treatment that's been provided, is that the sort of typical sort of treatment that's on offer?
Well, good evening, everyone, and hello, Amani, and thank you very much for the honour of being able to join you on this show this evening. I'm very happy to talk. I'm not, as you suggested, an expert in cancer. What I am is someone who fundraises and campaigns to make a difference for families like Amani's who are thrown into this world of being diagnosed with a brain tumour. Now, malignant brain tumours are comparatively rare, but they're no less devastating when they arrive into a family. And what we need to do, and what Armani has been talking about, is the need to access different trials, different treatments. And what we want is to see those treatments and trials being accessed into the UK. We need to understand what the barriers are, what we can do to make a difference, and you know, things like signing petitions and petitioning MPs to understand what we can do to make a difference, so that families don't need to worry so much about raising money and going abroad, but just concentrating on getting well and accessing new treatment and options and outcomes. And what we absolutely know is that we need to invest in scientific research, because that's where the answer lies. So very powerful, Amani, what you've been saying. You've been a huge advocate for the need for further research, and that's great. And you are a big part of the brain tumor research community. But we need to do more, and that's why it's so important and such an honour to be talking and sharing this with you tonight.
Yeah, and Khuram, I think you've been trying to highlight the need for research into a particular type of research and an organisation. Perhaps you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's really the brain tumour research. The issue is that when it comes to funding, brain tumour doesn't get parity of funding. So historically, brain tumour funding has received about 1% of the budget. Yet it's the biggest killer of men and women, you know, under 4, and children under the age of 40 or 45. And for women, it's under the biggest killer of under 35. But because it's rarer, you know, where breast cancer and leukemia are more common, there's not that zeal or desire or wish to impact huge amounts of money. And really what we're looking for is that, of course, the other thing is survival rates as well, because with certain breast cancers and leukemia, if it's caught early enough, the survival rate can be about 70% after 5 years. Whereas with brain tumors, you're looking at, depending on the diagnosis, something less than 20, less than 12, depending on the aggressive nature of the tumor. And, you know, there's very little going on in the UK in the form of trials to really try and make an impact. I don't know if you remember Tessa Jowell, she passed away in 2017.
Yeah.
And she gave a moving speech in, I think, the House of Lords or House of Parliament. And the government pledged to invest 40 million into researching brain tumor. And to date, they've since 2017, so pre-COVID, they've only released 9 million of it. And it's just not enough. We need about 35 million a year to be invested in brain tumor research if we're going to get anywhere. At the moment, as we're in a very niche group, we've made contact with other families that are involved in similar situations with Amani's mutation. And we're all having to fundraise. We're all having to travel abroad for treatment, whether it's CAR T cell treatment or unique cutting edge treatments, to Germany, to the US. And people don't understand that when this diagnosis happens, it impacts the whole family. They're devastated. The last thing we need is to be running around asking people for money. We should be able to, we should be at the cutting edge, really.
I guess there's two elements of that, isn't it? Right? I think there's a research fundraising for research into it, and then a fund to basically have access to latest treatment. Whether if it's not through the NHS, then a fund that people can draw on. Hugh, I mean, couple of examples of what we talked about. Amani's case and another one, right? Relatively young, right? 21 years old, very young, I would say. I guess cancer probably knows no age, but when you talk about cancers, right, what comes to your mind is that these things happen to people perhaps slightly older, etc. What's your experience?
I think that that's a very valid point. I think that we look at some cancers and we look at cancer strategy in the country at the moment, and they'll look at people and say, you can actually do something about this. You can look at your diet, you can look at the things that you do, you can look at the amount of exercise that you do, and you can protect yourself against some forms of cancer. And that just is not true of brain tumours, because they are indiscriminate. There are no ways you can say you could have protected, you could have done things differently, you could have avoided that diagnosis. It's an indiscriminate disease, and that's why it indiscriminately affects younger people. And to go back to the point that was made earlier about parity of funding, that is absolutely critical, because if you look at what we've done in a generation for people diagnosed with breast cancer or leukemia, we've turned the prognosis for those cancers on their head through investment in scientific research. Now, every year, pretty much in the 21st century, £35 million a year more has been invested in breast cancer research than in brain tumour research. So there's no surprise then that we haven't moved the dial for brain tumour patients, and that's got to change. And that will only come through campaigning and awareness raising, and that's what we do. That's what we're doing with Amani. And I don't think we should be looking at two pots of money. We should be looking at one pot of money that's put aside for brain tumours, because it's not just the fact that they're so devastating. It's there's an impact on families. There's an impact on society as well, where people aren't achieving in the way that they could have done through the treatment that they have. So we really have got to do better here.
So Khuram, what sort of uptake have you had in your campaign? Because I know you started a campaign of signatures, basically.
Yeah, it's not our campaign. It's a brain tumor research campaign. They're trying to raise 100,000 signatures so the issue can be debated in Parliament. The idea was to do it before brain research. The original target was tomorrow to raise 100,000 signatures. I think at the moment it's 60,000. Right. The idea is really to get as many signatures as we can before brain cancer tumor day, I think is in March sometime, and then present it to the government for debate. But the sad reality is we've already had this pledge from the government before when Sajal passed away. It's not a guarantee that it will make a change, but the idea is all we can do is publicize it and say, look, this is not fair. It's such a big killer. It's indiscriminate. It's the biggest killer of children, more than leukemia. People don't understand that, because just as you said, in relation to deaths of children, it's a bigger killer than leukemia for children. People hear about children getting leukemia all the time, but people don't realize that the brain tumor kills more children. I mean, these are young children, usually under the age of 10.
Indeed.
And pretty much people with cancerous brain tumors are written off in this country. That's the reality. We're fortunate in one hand that Amani's mutation, which is, I think, is a H3K27 mutation. There's this new phase 2 trial drug. It's not a cure, but it buys us more time for some of the patients, so that maybe along the line we can develop these alternate treatments like CAR T cell treatments or immunotherapies that may have a positive impact on brain tumors. But again, we're way behind Europe, and sometimes what we don't realize, we only realize it once you're in that situation, that there's nothing really on offer other than radio and chemo, which, you know, our oncologists told us really doesn't really work for brain tumors, especially aggressive brain tumors. And proof of the pudding is Amani's tumor size doubled during that time. So she went through all that pain, and people don't understand that it's, you know?
People don't understand how traumatic the process is either. It's not easy.
Do you want to explain how radiotherapy is for brain tumor?
You have like a mask of your face, and you're pinned down to the table, and you can't move, and you just have one hole to breathe from, and you have this burning smell that used to follow me around non-stop. Like even when I came home.
It causes swelling in the brain. The treatment causes swelling, so you've got more severe headaches. And of course, you know, people talk about the heart being the soul, but the reality is your complete personality is your brain, is who you are.
I completely lost who I was. I was a complete shell of myself. I couldn't look at my family. The treatment and medication completely changed the way that I looked. I couldn't see my friends, couldn't speak to my friends, couldn't do anything. I used to be non-stop talking, laughing, smiling, and I just completely lost that. I don't think my own family recognized me, let alone me feeling like myself. And I just, like I said before, that's why I've pushed myself today, because I don't know what my future holds. I don't know whether the treatment will work for me, or, you know, what's going to happen next. But if I can make a difference whilst I still can and help other people, then that's what I want to do. And the petition is the best way to do that, because I think there was a documentary or something that my mum and some of my family members have watched, that was saying how the HIV/AIDS community, they were dying in huge numbers, and it wasn't until, you know, the word got out there and people started protesting and, you know, generating interest around it, that finally not a cure was found, but people can live all the way until they die pretty much of natural causes because of the treatment that is available now for those patients. And if that can be something that is the case for people with brain tumors, then that would be amazing.
Indeed. So, Hugh, if the government has already pledged £40 million and they've only released £9 million of it, I guess it's isn't it a political thing? Isn't it knocking on political doors? Isn't it knocking on sort of, you know, MPs and councillors and whatever to say, look, this has been pledged, I honour your pledge, rather than having a question in the Commons?
Yes, and let's be clear here, that £40 million, it was as a result of what Tessa Jowell did, but it was also the result of, 5 years of campaigning that we've done with other petitions and engaging MPs and getting reports written and lobbying and all of those sorts of things. So unfortunately, it can be a slow process and people don't have the time. So we need to keep on pushing at MPs and we need to keep on pushing at government. And a petition is a really good way. And what I would absolutely say is the people watching this now, we would have the power to get that petition to 100,000 amongst our social medias just by using our phone. If everybody who was watching it tweeted about the petition, put it on their Facebook page, put it on their pages, and then sent them on to people and said, share this with your communities, we could almost do this tonight. So the power is with us to do it. We need to keep pushing people. That 40 million, we will access that money. We're closer to accessing it than we were. It's not going fast enough. I know it's not going fast enough, but it's not through lack of trying. We will keep doing that. And just to clear things up a little bit about the petition, yes, we want 100,000 signatures to present to the PM. We want to do it in March, which is Brain Tumour Awareness Month, and at the end of Brain Tumour Awareness Month is Wear a Hat Day. So it's all based around what we're going to do at the end of March when we take this petition, which will have 100,000 signatures at that point, to Downing Street. But I'm really pleading with everybody looking at this, just take down the link, support Armani and her family and what they need to do, but also it's just following a link to braintumorresearch.org, click on the petition and help us, because we will make a difference. We will do this.
So can you just repeat that link again, right? Because I think on the radio people just tend to sort of miss it. So I am trying to sort of get it so that it plays on our shows in our banner as well. So if we can get that, then perhaps we can have it visual on our sort of video broadcast.
Of course, it's braintumorresearch.org. braintumorresearch.org. And there will be an opportunity there to sign the petition.
Right. Okay. And I guess it's really, really important to Armani. And I guess the message from me, and I guess the message from our team really is that, you know, it's something that we really need to push. And it's only a signature really at the end of the day from an individual's point of view, but it means so much, I guess, to Armani and Khuram.
Yeah. Armani, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, we also have an Instagram page. I don't know if you can see it. It's at Fight for Armani, the number 4. That's where we give all our updates, and if we did have to do another fundraiser, where the petition link is also on the page. So if that's easier for people to access, then they can go to there as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I think what we'll do is we'll put that on our Facebook as well. I've only got about 15 seconds left, or so I need to go. Thank you very much, Armani. Really, really good to see you. Khuram, thank you very much. And Hugh, thank you for your contribution today. Listeners, this is it for today.
Thank you.
Until next week, Jazakallah khair for listening. Tune into Inspire FM for other quality programs from now until next week. But until then, Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.